Nixon was shrewd. He knew what he wanted. He knew how to get it. And nothing was going to stand in his way.
When a nation with the greatest tradition of respect for the rule of law is torn apart by unprecedented lawlessness, when a nation that is supposed to be the symbol of opportunity for the whole world to see is torn by racial strife, then it's time for new leadership and a new president, and that's what we're going to do in 1968.
Richard Nixon's political genius was to pick up on people's fear and dread of disorder.
Nixon has a Southern strategy, knows a lot of white people out there who don't like what's been going on in the country, and he can clothe it over in law and order.
Well, part of the Southern strategy, of course, is run around the euphemism law and order. And that's a pitch to suggest that civil rights has gone too far, and we need to turn the dial back.
Vietnam was also widening the national divide. Nixon's campaign appealed less to those who wanted to end the war than to those who wanted victory.
I believe that we have wasted America's military might by using it gradually rather than effectively.
He implied he had a secret plan for peace with honor.
A reporter asked him if he had a plan to end the war, and Nixon said yes. So technically he never said he had a plan to end the war, but he didn't have one. There was no plan.
In fact, as the race with Humphrey tightened, Nixon feared that peace talks going on in Paris would produce a deal that might hand the Democrats the election.
Johnson was trying to rig the peace talks to help Humphrey. Peace is at hand. Peace is coming.
Tricky Dick was not about to let that happen. He sent a go-between, Asia expert Anna Chennault, to ensure there would be no untimely breakthrough toward peace.
Anna Chennault was the Nixon agent who communicated with the Saigon regime to keep them from agreeing to come to the table.
Nixon promised the South Vietnamese a better deal if they waited until he was elected before joining the talks. The Saigon government stayed away. Back home, Nixon pressed his Southern strategy.
He talked about putting only members of the court who were strict constructionists, and that was sort of a code word. And what he meant is that they would be opposed to integration of the races.
He incorporated enough Wallace voters by speaking in the Southern Regional Code, and he even got enough independent voters who wanted to get out of the Vietnam War by very kind of cleverly couching his Vietnam position as one that might just point towards withdrawal.
We're going to go over big in November, all the way.
In the end, Wallace was pushed low enough so that Nixon could carry the outer South, which is to say Virginia, North Carolina, Florida.
He was like all things to all men, which you can't do in politics, but somehow he was able to do it.
Nixon barely won in 1968, but by scrambling and scratching and climbing and working, he won.
His Southern strategy worked. Nixon pulled off the unthinkable comeback.
Having lost a close one 8 years ago and having won a close one this year, I can say this: winning's a lot more fun.
He did it in defiance of the pundits.
I think the media really misread the 60s. They were caught up in it. They thought it was exciting. They were anti-war. They were countercultural. They misread this as a great national trend because it was a great trend among people they knew.
There was this invisible current just beneath the surface of fear of social change, and Richard Nixon harvested that and became the most powerful and influential politician of the 60s.
I, Richard Billhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear.
He had won the presidency by exploiting the issues that split the nation. He took office promising to heal the fractures.
The Constitution of the United States.
But once in the White House, Nixon did just the opposite. He lost no time in paying his debt to Strom Thurmond.
He hired Strom Thurmond's political aide, Harry Dent. He said, don't do anything on civil rights without checking with Harry Dent first. He immediately got to work on a strategy to stay federal judges' orders that schools had to integrate.
The heyday of civil rights progress was over.
Far from ending the Vietnam War, Nixon expanded it into neighboring countries, deepening the conflict at home. In 1970, peace marchers in New York were attacked by pro-war construction workers. Police did little to protect them. Not one to miss a trick. Nixon later appointed the Construction Workers Union chief his Secretary of Labor.
Nixon came to symbolize the way Americans divided themselves. Basically, the people who identify with Nixon and the people who despise Nixon are structurally the map of our red and blue states today.
In the summer of 1972, Miami Beach hosted the conventions of both parties. Nixon was reelected, this time resoundingly. He had succeeded in remaking American politics in his own image. And his so-called forgotten Americans would eventually help the GOP take the White House 7 times in 10 elections. 4 decades after he brought the 60s to a close, Nixon is most often remembered for the Watergate scandal that drove him from office. But his most significant legacy may well be the divided America he left behind.
To learn more about Nixon's the One, the '68 election, visit nixonstheone.org. Nixon's the One, the '68 election is available on DVD. To order, visit us online at shopwlrn.org.